Welcome to Insights in Sound, where we talk to the people behind the scenes, behind the technology, and behind the music. People you may not know, but you should.
My guest is Zoe Thrall. She is studio manager of the Hideout Studios in Henderson, Nevada. You have a rather rich and brilliant history.
I don't know about the brilliant part, but...
Yeah, but it would sound terrible to say a rich and dull history, wouldn't it?
Well, it might be true, though.
Give me a little bit on your personal background. Did you, musical background, technical background?
All of the above. I was a musician from a very young age, 7 years old. I picked up the flute when I was 7 and loved it, got immersed in it. As I grew older, there wasn't an instrument that I was put in front of that I didn't want to learn how to play. So with all that and being in every kind of ensemble through junior high and high school, one would have thought I would go into music. But I had an idea that I wanted to be a veterinarian because I loved animals. Okay. And I worked for a veterinarian in my high school years. And I was good in the sciences. And when I was going to college, I went in as a biology major. But I did go to a school that had a very strong music department. So I must have had it in the back of my head, right?
Clearly.
So the first semester of college, I learned that this school, and it was the State University of New York at Fredonia, had a recording program. And at the time, this is because it was 100 years ago, there was only 2 or 3 schools in the country that had 4-year programs in recording.
Yes.
University of Miami was one. There were others, but
this was 2-inch tape days, though, right?
Oh, hell yeah.
Uh-huh.
And I was smitten. When I got exposed to the department, I changed my major, you had to be a music major, so I had to audition, and I got into the music department on the oboe. So you couldn't be part of the recording program unless you were a music major.
But I do know that feeling, the first time you walk into a studio as a musician, you just go, ooh, twinkly.
Yeah. Oh.
Ooh. And you just want to know everything.
I wanted to know everything. Mm-hmm. It's like, this is for me. So, then I stayed there for 4 years. And in my senior year, I started researching where do I want to go for an internship. I lived close to New York City, an hour out of New York in the Hudson Valley. And, I looked at a number of studios. It was like Record Plant and Secret Sound, Media Sound, and Power Station. Those were the 4 I wanted to at least interview at. Mm-hmm. I went and saw all those studios, but Power Station was eluding me, and I realized that's the studio I want to go to. That's
just because it was eluding you? Or?
Because of the producers and engineers and the records that were being made out of there at the time, right? And so a few months before graduation, I'd call and I'd talk to the owner, Bob Walters, and I said, look, I'm looking for an internship. No, we don't need any more interns, click. I was crushed. Called back a month later, look, any changes? No, we don't need anybody, thank you. So about a week before I graduate, I call him and I said, look, I'm flying back, I graduated, I'm flying into New York from school. Just let me come see you, and after that, I'll never bother you again. He's like, okay, finally. So I walk in with my bags from school, my suitcases, leave my bags in the lobby, go up and have the interview. And he hired me that day. And I had to call my dad and said, Dad, I'm going to be a little late. I just got a job. So I literally started that day. And
so it was obviously your charming personality
I don't know what it was.
Overtook it, yeah.
I just had this intent to, want to be there, and it happened.
And maybe that's what he recognized, because that's one of the things that I talk to a lot of younger students about, is the idea that, there will probably, most likely, be somebody in your class who knows more than you do. But if you've got the attitude and
desire,
desire, stick-to-itiveness, whatever you want to call it, but that passion.
Yep.
I'd rather, and you talk about that with music too, I'd rather have a room full of passionate musicians who are not that great, as opposed to one asshole virtuoso.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then the rest is literally history. I went from being mentored by the great, some of the greats of that time. You know, the Bob Mountains, Neil Dorfman, you know, James Farber, and it goes on, and then great producers that were coming in and out of that place. I was at Power Station. That's where I met Steven Van Zandt, you know, guitarist, producer, actor now too.
Radio station DJ?
Oh, big time. Great DJ.
Yeah.
I was assisting on some of his productions. So it was like Gary U.S. Bonds and, oh God, I don't know. There were other records.
Southside Johnny.
Southside, but Southside we didn't do there. We did later. You know, his first solo album, Little Steven and the Disciples of Soul. So
I just want to be clear on this. You came in as an assistant, not as
I came in as an intern.
As an intern, okay. But so you were basically trying to do a little bit of everything to learn everything.
It was the, you know, the very typical start as an intern, then eventually got a job, runner. Yeah. And there was not, you know, I was there 24/7. I just wanted to be there, you know. If there was nothing going on, I'd go in the shop and fix headphones. Whatever there was, I just wanted to be immersed in it, you know.
Yeah, I understand.
Anyway, I eventually advanced to assistant engineer. I got a job, right? Paid job, not just an internship. I got credit for the internship, though.
Cool.
It turned into a job. Worked my way up to assistant, which is where I met Steven. And then on his first solo record, he was looking for this very specific sound on this song. Kind of like a Middle Eastern wind instrument sound. And his guitar tech says, well, Zoe plays oboe.
So your first session date.
My first session. So I played on the record. And at the end of the record, he said, do you want to go on tour? And it was like, what? Something I'd never considered. I was loving the environment. I was doing exactly what I wanted to be doing at the time. But I was also only 21 years old. And
You're indestructible at that age.
Yeah,
come on.
and I thought, man, a chance to go on a world tour. I guess I can't turn that up. So I said, yeah. It was a big decision because I was, you know, at a great place, learning from the best in the business. It's like to make a change at that point was huge, but I was young. It's like, whenever am I going to get to do this? Well, that relationship turned into 10 years of working in 4 world tours and, you know, many, many, many records done with Steven, you know.
So were you also, I mean, when you were off tour, were you then still doing engineering and studio work and everything? Okay.
Exactly. So
but did you actually give up your job at the power station?
Yes. So I ended up working full time for Steven for 10 years. You know, between tours, we were making records and then touring.
And so you were basically coming back into the studio as his engineer at that point.
Yeah, not all the time, but sometimes. Yeah. And then I set up a studio in my house, in my apartment, apartment in New York, and then we'd make records there. So yeah, that who knew that that oboe would open so many doors, but it did.
That's funny.
Yeah. And then, well, if that led to, I got a call from Tony Bon Jovi, who was also the co-owner of Power Station, that he was looking for a new manager. Now, keep in mind, when I was working with Steven, I learned everything about the music industry from him. Not only about making records, he was an amazing producer, but about record contracts, publishing, you know, management. So this is where I started learning like the other side of the business. And I owe everything to him about that side of things, learning about that side of things.
And that's, I mean, first of all, that's not an opportunity everybody gets because you do most people do tend to kind of focus on one thing, whether it's becoming a great engineer, producer, whatever it is, or you go into the technical side of things and you're, you know, the studio tech for a whole bunch of rooms or whatever. But the idea of being able to dabble in everything, and especially at a time in your life when A, you were young, and B, you were a sponge, you know?
Yeah.
What a great opportunity. Yeah. So at that point, you were kind of qualified to do studio management because you knew all the other peripheral stuff.
I knew how studios ran.
Yeah.
You know? Been in them. I was in them for 10 years.
In those days, the studio manager was not just, you know, god or goddess. You know, they were keeping everything moving, and there really was this sense of, okay, I have no idea who handles this job, it must be you. You know, because you're kind of the last sieve that everything else falls to if somebody else can't handle it. So I would think that in turn would push you to have to learn even more stuff, because it's like something falls on your lap and you go, okay, if I don't figure this out, who's going to?
Yeah. I mean, there's the one side of studio management where I think it's our job to make the environment as conducive to the creative process as possible.
We're a service industry.
It's a service industry, but look, the artist is their most vulnerable in their creative process. And if they're not comfortable in your studio, that's never going to come out and reveal itself. If they're nervous about somebody popping in or they're just not feeling it, then the art suffers.
Yeah.
So part of the studio manager's job is to make the environment as safe for them as possible. Then there's the business side, of course. You know, all dealing with record companies and the producers and different personalities, of course. So having a very patient, open mind is a very good thing if you want to go into this side of the business.
Well, I think that pretty much is true of any side of the business if you are not the artist, per se. And if you are the artist, it's even more important in certain ways to know it. Sadly, that's not always the case.
True.
But those artists who are savvy and who understand those aspects of it tend to be more successful because there's a certain degree of empathy there. And I think that is probably the bottom line of what helps you do your job more than anything.
100%. For sure.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about how things have changed, because boy, howdy have they.
Oh, yes.
We're in a totally different world now. We're in a different industry.
Yes.
You know, we were talking earlier about the idea that there's not a lot of opportunity now for students coming out of recording schools. There are tons more recording schools than there were when you and I were coming up, but there are far fewer opportunities now.
Yeah.
So what does that look like when you talk to younger people now? What does it look like from your perspective?
I think it's a little better in the most recent years than it was maybe, say, 10 years ago, because it truly has now morphed into this hybrid thing. Record making has morphed into that.
Yeah.
Right? So I embrace the ability for the technology to allow someone to make records, at least start them, the songwriting process at home. I think it's fantastic. You know, the software is varied. It's really good. It sounds great. It's cheaper, and I think it helps the creative process. However, there's a point where I still believe, and this has been proven now, this is what I mean by this hybrid process of record making, where if you're a young artist, start at home, but you still need a proper environment to listen to when you're doing the mix and, you know, the final product. If you're a honed, you know, experienced record producer, you can still do, you know, in your home studio and still need, you know, you can't record a band in your house. Most can't. Some, there's a handful that can, but
unless you have really, really patient neighbors.
Exactly. But so I think it's a really healthy way, and it's been proven that it works this way. You know, so there is still space for, you know, commercial facilities in conjunction with what you can do as an entrepreneur. Let's call it that. Yeah,
I mean, clearly there is space for fewer commercial facilities because, you know, for the most part, you're laying your basic tracks and then everybody's going off to their individual little laptops and stuff. But how does it differ for you as a studio manager? I mean, obviously your whole perspective is different, but is your job different in that sense too?
Yeah, you know, it's different. I spend a lot more time explaining the process before they ever come in. Like people,
Really?
Yeah.
Why so?
And I don't mean the record-making process. I mean the expectation, because I think people, especially I get a lot of young artists, I think they think that you come to a big studio and the record's going to sound great just because it's a great studio. You know, it's not.
There's this thing called talent.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And so I find myself spending a lot more time on the phone prior to them ever coming in, explaining what, you know, tempering their expectations in a way, you know, like talking to them about, well, what are your existing tracks? What do you have? What do you want to do step by step once you come to the studio. Do you have a producer? 9 times out of 10, they don't. And they think...
Of course, the engineer is the producer.
Yeah, and I have to explain the difference between the engineer and the producer, and they don't understand that. So it's an education. And I find that I have to do a lot more of that now.
Why do you think that is? You think, I mean, because I think, the record-making process has always been something of a mystery to younger musicians.
Sure.
And it kind of surprises me because I would think that now, with so much more information out there, with so many more, as you say, younger kids, they have their own studio and a laptop now, would they not understand a lot of that?
Exactly. You're answering your own question. It's, yeah. They don't understand the process. And they think, and it's very naive, but this is, well, Beyonce worked there, so I'm going to sound like Beyonce.
Yeah,
no,
of course.
Not really.
Well, if you bring her in as a guest vocalist or something, Do you find also that it's different now in terms of booking studios and stuff like that? How does that...
this is the part that makes me crazy. The last minute booking. That's it. That's all it is out now. It used to be you'd get bookings months in advance.
And 4 months.
And 4 months.
Yes.
Now it's, I'll get 10 calls today. Do you have time today? Today. Or tomorrow. And that's about the lead time. That's it. It's either today or tomorrow, not in 3 weeks.
Wow.
Or 3 months.
It's like, hey, want to go out and grab a bite? While we're out, we can cut some tracks.
Exactly. It is that. It is kind of like that.
Interesting.
It's bizarre. Yeah.
So, are you...
And that could be with major artists, too. It's not just like local.
That's interesting, because that was going to be my next question, is are you bringing this all down to a lack of, let's say, understanding, a lack of expertise, but clearly not then?
No, sometimes it's not.
I would think that having the opportunity as an artist to work on my stuff at home, I'm going to know that, okay, I'm to a point where, maybe next week I should book studio or, whatever it is. I mean, but I guess that's not the case anymore, huh?
Not as much, no.
So, but there's also a lot more shorter sessions now, right?
Very
People
much.
coming in to do 1 track or 2 tracks as opposed to doing an album and locking out for a month or 2.
Yeah, or they'll do it a song at a time. So they'll book a day and leave. Then come back 2 weeks later, book a day, leave. Yeah.
And of course, the record industry having changed, a lot of people are no longer really interested in doing albums. They're just interested in doing a track
That too.
and getting it out there.
Yeah, that too. Yep.
And so does that change the way you operate in terms of relating to the artists as well?
I hope not. I mean, you don't get the interaction as much because they're not here as much.
Well, and that's what I'm wondering, because, one of the things that was always interesting to me was when somebody would book the studio for a month, 2 months, 3 months, it's like they become like your brother-in-law who's, staying over, and you walk in any time of day or night, they're there and they're, practically in their bathrobe, whatever, and that's a completely different relationship than if you're just doing a session for a day or two.
Yeah.
So it really, and again, that influences the creative process too. You talk about them being comfortable, when somebody's got a room locked out for 3 months.
They make it their own.
They really do. Yeah, exactly.
And people do come in their bathrobes, by the way. When I worked at the Palms,
Oh, sure, of course, because they just come down from the hotel, yeah.
I had one producer, Tricky Stewart, not leave. They did quite a, there was a year that they were there basically a year and a half. They came. They loved working at the studio. But there was one period of time, I think we were doing the Usher record, and he didn't leave the building for 2 weeks. Because he'd come from his hotel room right down to the studio, go right back up.
You got all the food you want and everything.
He came down in his bathrobe one day. It's like, hey, we're making records.
I mean, and that I think is really kind of interesting, the way the whole relationship has changed like that. Getting back to the whole intern thing, I mean, there's no more opportunities for someone to come up the way you or I did.
It's much rarer.
Yeah.
Because there's fewer studios. And the need for them is not as not there. So yeah.
What do you say to people now who are coming up And, you know, obviously they have to carve their own path too. Everybody has to carve their own path. But where are the opportunities now, do you think?
I get asked this a lot, and I think there's a lot of opportunities. Everyone fantasizes about working in a commercial facility with their favorite artist, blah, blah, blah. First and foremost, this lifestyle might not be suited for you. You have to do a lot of soul searching to make sure you want to live this lifestyle, because there's one thing that hasn't changed in the industry. We work 24/7.
Yes.
So you have to be, your nature has to be such that you're willing to drop everything, especially in the entry level, more so than when things get booked. So
Yes.
there have been times where I've had to call even my assistants. They're at dinner on their anniversary with their wife. Nope, you got to come in, sorry. And they know it. So, and it's not 9 to 5. If you're more suited for that, if you're thinking about having a family, if you want more balance in your life, all legitimate lifestyle choices, think about some other things. What are those other opportunities? Well, you can work for a manufacturer in R&D if that suits you. You could be a tech if you have those kind of skills, not just in studios, which are fewer and far between, but, you know, again, for a manufacturer, television, post-production, film, you know, there's mastering opportunities, maybe not so much anymore there either, but there's, you know, in education, there's many opportunities.
Yeah. There's agencies.
Agencies, yep.
You know,
So,
and you're right there. There's a lot more diversification now than there was coming up because, you know, in, let's say, the 80s, if you had, for example, an agency, like an ad agency or something, they were going to book a studio.
yeah.
You know, they're probably over at Howie Schwartz or somebody, you know. And
Oh, man.
yeah. And now all of those agencies probably have a room, you know, of their own
Yeah.
and a person or people of their own. And again, that's a job opportunity that didn't really exist before.
Yeah.
So, and yeah, R&D, I mean, you know, again, back when the earth was still cooling, you know, you had most of these companies were founded by a couple of guys in a garage somewhere,
Yeah.
you know, and fortunately for some of them, they had somebody in their circle who knew about marketing, you know, and I've often said a lot of these guys would still be in that garage somewhere if not for the marketing genius.
100%. I mean, how cool would it be to work for like Ivana Manley at
Yeah.
Manley Labs?
Yeah, exactly.
That's like the coolest job. And you're working, well, 9 to 5-ish, Monday through Friday. You know, you have a life. Blah, blah.
Yeah. Do you feel like the industry is healthy now? Is it a comeback?
Well, it's just different. I think it is healthy, but it's different. You know, and you just got to figure out how to maneuver in it. You
Well,
know?
and that brings me to a point that I think is important for not just younger people, but for all of us, the understanding of how to evolve, reinvent yourself on a regular basis, you know, and really kind of be open to where things lead you. Because as you pointed out in your own career, every little bit of experience, even if you think it has absolutely nothing to do with what you want, is going to come into play.
Very much. Yeah. Very much true. Yeah, that is so true. But I think that's something we can learn from them. They have more of that attitude more than we did or do. I can speak for myself, and I do. You know, we went into the industry thinking, I'm just doing this, and I'm doing it for the rest of my life.
Yep.
They have a much more freestyle, open-minded view of where life takes them, and I think they feel more open to taking that path wherever it may lead, kind of attitude.
And, you know, that could be a generational thing, too, because,
Yeah.
you know, we are the product of parents who, you know, were raised in a depression, right?
Yep.
And so you had to pick a job and stay with that job, you
Yep.
know, and if you were really lucky, it had job security and a pension, you know,
Yep.
whereas this generation is more attuned to the idea because they've seen so much change of being able to go with it. And you're right, that's probably a damn good survival mechanism, you know?
Yeah, I admire them for that.
I think all of us, you know, those of us that continue to thrive, we do so because we can keep reinventing ourselves in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good for you.
Well, not me. Good for them.
Well, but good for you too, because you've continued to thrive. It's good to see you still doing stuff.
I agree. And the industry, I still love it. The studio's been great. I've only just started here, but Kevin Churko, who's the owner, has been wonderful. We've been friends for years, and it's a very natural environment to come into again.
Oh, it's a great place.
Yeah, it's a beautiful place.
Yeah. Well, Zoe Thrall, thank you for being my guest.
Thank you so much for inviting me to do this.
It's my pleasure.
Right.
Hey, I'm Daniel Keller. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and join us each week for Insights in Sound.